In the heart of the sleepy, sun-soaked suburb of Briar Glen, nestled between perfect rows of magnolia trees and mailbox clusters, lived a woman named Evelyn Carter. A research analyst in urban development and newly divorced, Evelyn had moved to Briar Glen to rebuild quietly, privately, on her own terms. The neighborhood looked like the kind of place where peace came standard. Lawns were trimmed like green velvet, driveways sparkled. Every porch had the same welcome mat, and the sky always looked like a default screensaver. It was supposed to be perfect. But perfection, as Evelyn quickly learned, came with a cost. Her introduction to that cost came 3 days after she moved in, when a knock on the door revealed Meredith Langford, HOA president, self-appointed neighborhood guardian, and unofficial ruler of Briar Glen. With a clipboard tucked under one arm, and the practiced smile of someone who'd rehearsed this speech 100 times, Meredith politely informed Evelyn that her patio furniture did not comply with neighborhood visual standards. Her crime? Wooden chairs. The HOA only allowed wicker sipal. That should have been her first warning, but Evelyn, ever the optimist, brushed it off. Until the fence. Evelyn's modest backyard backed up to Meredith's home, and that meant any time she stepped outside to water her garden, stretch, sip coffee, or just breathe, Meredith was there, watching, not openly, not creepily, just always there, like a potted plant you forgot to water but somehow keeps thriving. So Evelyn decided to reclaim her space. She'd build a fence, not just any fence, but a 6-foot cedar privacy fence, compliant with every zoning code, properly permitted and inspected down to the millimeter. She knew the rules, she studied them. Urban development was her thing. If anyone knew how to legally construct a backyard sanctuary, it was her. The city approved the plan. A contractor named Wes, an old-timer with sun-scorched skin and a talent for fence building, started work on a warm Monday morning in late spring. The smell of cedar and a rhythmic sound of drills filled the air. At 10:34 a.m., those sounds were interrupted by the unmistakable click of stilettos on concrete. Meredith Langford was coming. Wearing a powder-pew dress with pressed pleats and sunglasses that screamed power lunch, she strode up to Evelyn's property like a general inspecting the front lines. "Evelyn," she said, voice taut with restraint. "What exactly is this?" Evelyn wiped her hands on her jeans and calmly replied, "A fence. On my property. With a permit. I can show it to you if you'd like." Meredith didn't ask to see the papers. She was already launching into a tirade. "This fence violates the spirit of Briar Glen. We have an open neighborhood aesthetic here. You're turning this place into a compound." Wes looked up from his drill and muttered, "Ladies unhinged," under his breath. But Evelyn held her ground. "The fence doesn't violate any binding HOA regulations. I checked. Twice." Meredith's eyes flashed with something that was not neighborly concern, was control. She needed this neighborhood to look a certain way, and she needed everyone in it to behave a certain way. Evelyn, with her boundary setting and cedarwood, was disrupting the ecosystem. That evening, Evelyn noticed a paper pinned to the HOA bulletin board. It was a community alert, penned by Meredith herself, describing a structural eyesore that had the potential to destabilize property values and community morale. Accompanying it was a grainy photo of Evelyn's half-built fence, taken from an angle that made it look like a wooden cage. Neighbors read it. Whispers started. A couple of them offered tight-lipped smiles as they passed Evelyn on the sidewalk. The message was clear. The war had begun. Then came the text. "You'll regret this fence. I'm having it inspected. Violations will be found. MM." Evelyn stood at her window that night, sipping tea and watching the streetlights flicker across her fresh cedar panels. She knew this wasn't about fence height or neighborhood harmony. This was about control, and she wasn't about to hand hers over. The next morning, police showed up. 2 officers, one clearly bored, the other visibly tired, knocked on her door. Behind them, Meredith stood on the sidewalk with a legal pad and a smug expression. "Ma'am," said Officer Reyes, "we've received a call about a possible code violation regarding construction on your property. Do you have documentation for your fence?" Evelyn handed over a neatly labeled folder. permits, blueprints, survey maps, all stamped and approved. The officers reviewed everything carefully, while Meredith practically buzzed with anticipation. After a few minutes, Officer Reyes handed back the folder. "Everything looks good. You're in the clear." "But it's ruining the neighborhood," Meredith protested. "It looks like a prison wall." Officer Chan, the younger of the two, raised an eyebrow. "It's cedar. That's top-tier wood. You're sure you don't just have a personal issue with your neighbor?" The officers left. Meredith, unfazed, pulled out her phone and started filming. "This is going straight to the HOA page," she muttered. Felony landscaping in action. The next night, Evelyn showed up at an emergency HOA meeting. She expected maybe 6 people. Instead, the community center was packed. Meredith was at the front, arms folded, photos blown up on poster boards. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we are under siege." What followed was a monologue worthy of a courtroom drama. Claims of decreased curb appeal, community betrayal, and even a threat to suburban tranquility. Evelyn stood at the back, watching the room slowly sour with doubt as Meredith presented manipulated photos. Crooked fence lines, gaps in the wood, fake shadows. "I took those photos yesterday," Evelyn said, stepping forward. "Here are the originals. Check the metadata. The edits are obvious." A buzz of confusion spread. Whispers. Raised eyebrows. Meredith's grip on her audience was slipping, but she wasn't done yet. The HOE room had never been this tense. Evelyn Carter stood at the center now, papers in hand, eyes scanning the crowd that had come expecting a scandal. What they got instead was truth. The kind that stripped ego down to its bones. "Meredith's photos were altered," she said calmly. "Check the timestamps, the shadows. I brought the originals. Here's the footage from my doorbell cam too." A man from the back, Trevor, a retired firefighter who rarely spoke at meetings, stood and squinted toward Meredith. "She edited the photos?" he asked aloud, incredulously. Evelyn nodded. "To make the fence look illegal, to make me look like a threat to her image of this neighborhood." A few gasps trickled across the room. The mood was shifting. Even the board members at the long folding table looked uneasy. Alan Cho, the HOA treasurer, whispered something to the secretary beside him. Meredith Langford stood at the front of the room, frozen. She wasn't used to being questioned, especially not in public. For years, she'd ruled the HOA like a monarch with a clipboard. Rules weren't just they were personal. But tonight, something cracked in her perfect suburban shell. "This isn't about offense," Evelyn continued. "It's about who gets to feel at home here, about control disguised as order. I moved here for peace, not permission slips." Her voice remained calm but firm, like someone who had spent her career building cases with data and law. She wasn't grandstanding, she was laying out a thesis. Someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the room was filled with the quiet rhythm of hesitant but genuine applause. Meredith's mouth tightened. "You don't understand," she snapped, her voice higher now. "This neighborhood works because we keep things uniform. We follow standards. Without rules, we fall into chaos." "Whose rules?" Evelyn shot back. "'Cause the official HOA guidelines approved fences up to 6 feet. The city approved mine, but the moment it touched your view, it became a problem." The air bristled with quiet discomfort. Meredith's allies were shrinking back. Her power, once absolute, had been built on fear of confrontation. But Evelyn didn't fear her, and now others didn't either. "I call for a vote," said Alan Cho suddenly, standing. "A motion to investigate potential misconduct by the HOA president, specifically misuse of power, manipulation of documents, and harassment of a homeowner." The room fell into stunned silence. Even Evelyn looked surprised. Meredith's cheeks flushed pink. "Alan, you can't be serious." "I am," he replied calmly. "This isn't the first complaint, just the first one someone had the courage to challenge you on." He wasn't wrong. After the meeting adjourned, Evelyn didn't go straight home. She stayed behind with a few board members who quietly thanked her. One of them, an older woman named Fran who had lived in Briar Glen since the late 80s, leaned in and whispered, "You've said what we've all been thinking for years." Evelyn smiled and nodded, heart pounding not with fear, but with resolve. The next morning, Evelyn woke up to find a note on her porch, a real note, handwritten, on thick stationery with roses in the corners. I may have gone too far. Perhaps we both did. But I suppose I wasn't ready for someone like you. M.L. There was no apology, just the ghost of one. Later that day, the HOA inbox was flooded. Anonymous tips, screenshots of Meredith's past messages, other homeowners sharing quiet stories of intimidation. One man claimed Meredith had told him his daughter's trampoline was a threat to aerial uniformity. Evelyn didn't need revenge. Truth had already done its job. Within a week, the board had voted Meredith out as HOA president. Officially, it was framed as a voluntary resignation due to personal matters, but the neighborhood knew. Briar Glen, in all its suburban symmetry, had drawn a new boundary, and this one didn't need a fence. A month later, the cedar panels stood strong under the Ohio summer sun. Birds nested nearby. Lavender lined the base of the fence. Evelyn sipped her morning coffee on the patio. Unwatched, unbothered, Wes, the contractor, came by to check the stain and laughed. Still standing, just like you. She smiled, barely flinched. That weekend, the neighborhood held a cookout. Something Briar Glen hadn't done in years. It was potluck style, lawn chairs, kids running around, paper plates and laughter. Evelyn brought lemonade and chocolate cake. At one point she noticed Meredith standing under the gazebo, alone. She looked smaller without her clipboard and heels. Evelyn walked up beside her, both of them watching the kids playing tag near the bounce house. Meredith spoke first. I was wrong about you. Evelyn didn't reply right away. You weren't wrong. You were afraid. Meredith blinked. Of what? That something could change and still be good. They stood in silence for a few moments longer. Then Evelyn walked back to the crowd, laughing with the others. Moral of the story. Sometimes the biggest battles come wrapped in the smallest disagreements. But fences don't always divide. Sometimes they define boundaries in the best way. Standing up doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like cedar, courage and calm.